Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. Now, this week I want to take you back to my childhood. I'm a child of the 60s, and I want to revisit what I call the golden era of comic books. Now, growing up as a child, I remember going to my uncle's drugstore. I remember visiting the grocery store with mom and dad, and my grandparents loved to take me and my sister to the department stores. Kmart was big during that era. But every time you would walk in the drugstore, the grocery store, or the department store, what did you see near the front of the store or near the cash register? You saw a rack, and that rack was full of comics. Now, during this era that I was growing up, DC and Marvel superhero comics dominated the racks. That was what you saw when you walked in the door. Now, I'm talking about heroes like Superman, Spider-Man, X-Men, Wonder Woman, the Justice League, and that's just to name a few. But one of my favorites, one of my all-time favorites, was Batman. Now, you may say, why Batman, John? Out of all the superheroes that are out there, why Batman? Well, to me, Batman was really cool because he was a hero who possessed no superpowers. Now, I do love the fact that Batman was a martial artist and he was very gifted and very diligent in his martial arts training. But along with his training, what did Batman use? Again, no superpowers. He used his wits and he used his amazing gadgets. All those incredible things that he either had stored in the Batmobile, stored in the Bat motorcycle, stored in the Bat helicopter, stored in the Bat plane. But most of the time, those amazing gadgets were stored in his utility belt. But Batman used all of those amazing tools to combat crime. Now, if you dig into the origins of the comic book series, you learn early on that the very presence, even the very name of Batman, struck fear in Gotham's criminal underworld. Now, growing up, one of my prized possessions was a Batman cowl. I don't know if my mom or dad got it for me or a grandparents got me. I just remember that cowl, and it looked exactly like the cowl that Batman would put on when Bruce would get ready to go out as the Caped Crusader. It looked exactly like the cowl that he put on before he went out to fight crime. And I remember as a young kid placing that on my head and imagining myself as Bruce Wayne, having an opportunity to go into the backyard with this oversized cowl on my head, a towel paper clipped around my neck, or using a clothespin, something to hold that little towel on. But when I walked out in the backyard with that cowl on my head, I felt powerful. I felt invincible. To me, I was capable of doing anything because I was Batman. Batman, as you can see, was a very relatable hero. I mean, I'd never been bit by a spider. I never came from a planet with a red star and knowing that the yellow star of Earth would make me super strong. I wasn't born on an island that gave me superpowers and the ability to do all these incredible things that Wonder Woman could do. No, like Batman, I was mortal. And that's what made Batman so cool. Now, if you don't know the origin story of Batman, Batman was created by two individuals. We know of Bob Kane, who is the artist, but there was also another individual involved, and his name was Bill Finger. Now, the Caped Crusader, Batman, he debuted in the 27th issue of the comic book series Detective Comics. That 27th issue was released on March 30th, 1939, well before I was ever thought, conceived of, or even had an opportunity to be thought of entering the world. Matter of fact, my dad was 3 years old at the time that this Batman issue came out. Today, my dad's 89. Do the math. You know, Batman proved to be such a popular superhero in the Detective comic book series that a self-titled comic book series ultimately began to be published just a year later in 1940. Now, again, if you don't know the origin story of Batman and you've not had an opportunity to go see any of the major motion pictures, let me give you a quick background on the story of Batman. Now, having witnessed the brutal murder of his parents, a young boy by the name of Bruce Wayne was raised as an orphan by Alfred, the family butler. Now, Alfred referred to him as Master Wayne all through the series, and even in the movies, you still see that carried out. Master Wayne, as Alfred affectionately called him, he dedicated his life to fighting the senseless violence and crime that ultimately led to the death of his parents. Now, out of all the things that he could choose, young Bruce Wayne wanted an image that would strike fear and terror into the heart of the criminal underworld. One of the variations of the story of the Batman creation is that young Bruce fell into an abandoned well. And when he fell into this abandoned well, it took him into a cave that was full of bats. And as those bats flew out of the cave to escape the startling of a young boy falling into their midst, all of a sudden, Bruce got an idea. He could use the image of a bat, a terrifying creature of the night, to strike fear in the criminal underworld. And thus, the background story of Batman had been formed. Now, fast forward to where we are today, and more than 80 years later, we've seen Batman in comic books, on TV, in movies, in animations, cartoons, and we've even seen Batman in a number of video games. I remember as my kids were growing up and they had their Nintendo 64, I had an opportunity to be the Caped Crusader as we battled Joker and Penguin and some of the other villains that Batman faced, and had a great time playing and interacting with my kids when they were young. But interestingly enough, the Dark Knight's face and logo are among the most recognized of faces and logos worldwide. I mean, who wouldn't recognize the silhouette of the Batman cowl? Who wouldn't recognize the symbol that was portrayed into the sky from the bat signal on top of Gotham Tower? Now, Batman's image and likeness has gone on to appear on t-shirts, on hoodies, on shoes, on hats, on lunchboxes, and just about any and every product you can imagine. At some point in time, the Batman character, or Batman and Robin, or Batman and Robin and Batgirl, some variant of Batman and the characters that were part of the series have shown up on some form of advertising. Now, interestingly enough, Batman is one of the rare characters in comic book lore that has gone on to transcend print and film to really become part of our shared culture. And regardless of whether or not they've followed the comics or they follow superheroes, people around the world know who Batman is and what he stands for. Don't ask me how, but as I've had an opportunity to travel the world, I've had an opportunity to ask people about superheroes, and the name Batman comes up and seems to be a universal love for this character. And if you've ever had an opportunity to visit any cosplay event, here's what I can tell you. Batman is going to show up, as will some of the villains, on a consistent and regular basis at any of the major cosplays. Now, the Batman series also introduced us to who? Billionaire Bruce Wayne. Again, young boy, raised as an orphan, seeking to avenge his parents' death. Bruce Wayne, Batman's alter ego. Now, we also had an opportunity to meet Alfred, the butler, who was Bruce's confidant. He was his mentor, he was his trainer, and he was his supporter in taking care of him in his role as Batman. Now, as we dig deeper into the franchise, we also got an opportunity to meet some other characters. We got an opportunity to meet Dick Grayson, who came from a similar story. His parents died in an accident where a underworld character seeking extortion from a circus sabotaged the high wires that Dick's parents flew on. They were known as the Flying Graysons. They fell to their death as young Dick Grayson watched. He was adopted into the family, literally brought in to stay with Bruce Wayne, and over time evolved the trust that Bruce needed to bring him in, and Dick Grayson became Robin, the Boy Wonder. We also had an opportunity to meet Commissioner James Gordon and his daughter Barbara, who later became Batgirl, as well as Lucius Fox, Chief O'Hara, and other characters that were supporting actors for the show. And then, of course, there were the villains of Gotham. Now, Batman's first villain, if I were to ask you who it was, you'd probably get it wrong. It was a character by the name of Dr. Death. Now, he appeared in Detective Comics issue number 29 in 1939. Now, another early villain was Hugo Strange. He was a psychologist, he was a chemist, and he made his appearance as Batman's first major villain in 1940. Now, over time, we've seen other major villains that Batman has battled over the decades, and that would include Ra's al Ghul, Poison Ivy, the Scarecrow, and more familiar names like Penguin, the Joker, Harley Quinn, the Riddler, and Catwoman. But I want to focus my attention on one particular villain in particular, and that is Harvey Two-Face Dent. Now, Two-Face made its debut in Detective Comics issue number 66. And then he disappeared until reappearing in Batman issue number 1, 1940. Apparently, the character that showed up in Detective Comics was important enough that he was in the inaugural issue of the Batman comic series in the spring of 1940. But then, interestingly, after that, the character of Two-Face disappeared until 2 issues of the Batman comic series some 10 years later. And then after another 2-decade absence, the character of Two-Face reappeared again in 1971 and has continued to appear going forward. And this really solidified Two-Face's position as one of Batman's most recurring foes. Now, if you don't know the backstory of this villain, to me it's worth telling, and it's going to set up the lesson I want to leave you with as we look at the life of Two-Face. Now, Two-Face started out as a character known as Harvey Apollo Kent, not Dent, but Kent, in the original comic series. Later on, his name was changed for some reason to Harvey Dent. Now, by vocation, Harvey was Gotham City's most respected, most admired district attorney. He was well known for his unwavering fight against corruption and seeking to stop the criminal underworld that was plaguing Gotham City. Harvey Dent worked very closely with Commissioner Gordon and with Batman to combat and ultimately bring to justice the criminals that were plaguing Gotham City. Now, as you go and you look at the comic book series, some of the interesting traits of Harvey Dent is he was a handsome young man with a promising political future. Now, interestingly enough, Harvey Dent also carried with him a double-headed coin, and he used this coin to make important decisions. One side of the coin was pristine, the other side disfigured. That was a shadow of things to come. Now, the origin of the story, by one account, goes back to Harvey's father, Christopher, who in one version of the story said that Christopher also used the coin to make decisions, including the decision whether or not to punish his son. And in this version of the story, Christopher, when the coin would land and he would have to punish his son, he would often physically abuse Harvey to the point that it was bad. Now, there's another version of the story that Christopher passed on the family's lucky coin to his son. In this version, Christopher used this coin to make decisions and it served him well, so he gave it to Harvey to carry as a lucky charm, so when he too made important decisions, luck would be on his side. Now, there's a third version of the coin story that the coin, this double-sided coin, two-faced, belonged to mob boss Sal Maroni. And ultimately, this coin was used in evidence in the criminal prosecution of Maroni because a fingerprint on the coin could put Maroni at the scene of a murder. But regardless of the origin, the two-faced coin really became a trademark symbol of Two-Face's psychotic, delusional way of thinking. So that begs the question, if you're not a Batman fan and you don't know the backstory, how did a handsome, well-respected DA ultimately go from living a life of prosecuting a crime to become one of Gotham's famous villains? How did Gotham's White Knight, as he was referred to, fall from grace? Well, that event happened in a Gotham courtroom where Sal Maroni was on trial for murder. Remember one of the coin origin stories I shared earlier. Now, Harvey Dent was making the prosecution's case. And as he approached the witness stand, Sal Maroni threw a vial of acid in Dent's face. This acid horribly disfigured as it burned away the left side of Harvey's face. And as a result of that, he was rushed to the hospital. But in that moment, this incident, the vial of acid thrown in his face, this began Harvey Dent's slow descent into madness. It literally unleashed the dark side of Harvey Dent. Now, what we know from reading the series and watching the movies, we see that Harvey suffered a severe psychological breakdown. And in this psychological breakdown, it led to the emergence of a second, very violent personality that was obsessed with duality, back to the coin, and chance. In a moment, in a courtroom, because of a vial of acid and the events that followed, Two-Face was born. Now, in his twisted way of thinking, Two-Face saw the corrupt legal system as being responsible for his disfigurement. And sadly, Batman ultimately became a symbol of Gotham's injustice. And in Dent's demented mind, he became obsessed with killing off Batman as a symbol of the corrupt legal system. Now, Harvey Two-Face Dent also targeted those he believed were responsible for not only his fate, but those who were part of the corrupt legal system. And as he would seek out to identify his victims and ultimately capture them time and time again, Two-Face would use the lucky coin to, number one, choose his victims, and number two, determine their fate. It was a flip of the coin whether they lived or died. Now, Harvey Two-Face Dent, to me, is an interesting villain. Because as you follow the story of Two-Face, you see an individual that vacillates back and forth between his old self as the DA and the monster that he had become. In a sense, he was kind of like Janus, the Roman god, and Harvey himself, like Janus, lived in two worlds. His past life as Harvey Dent, the DA, and seeking to do the right thing, but at the same time struggling with this other personality taking control of his life, his future life as the maniacal villain Two-Face. And in the movie The Dark Knight, I think Harvey summed up the transformation from prosecutor to persecutor very well. Here's what he said. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So I've spent a lot of time talking about Batman and even more time talking about Two-Face. So at this point, you may be saying, okay, John, what can we learn from the story of Two-Face? What can we take from this comic book character that we can apply to our lives? Well, here's what I can tell you. Who shows up in your life matters. And I'm here to tell you, who shows up matters a lot. Now, I want you to think about the Harvey Dent Two-Face story. And you and I in our lives, we all have Harvey Dents and we all have Two-Faces in our lives. And if you think about the Harvey Dents that you and I have in our lives, who are they? These are the people that we respect, the people that we admire. Why? Because they give us good counsel, they give us good advice. These Harvey Dents in our lives are the trustworthy people, men and women of high integrity who are dedicated to one thing, helping us rise to our potential. They're there to support our efforts and they're there to cheer us on to success. These Harvey Dents in our lives are the selfless people who want the very best for you and they want the very best for me. At the end of the day, they want us to win. These people are fully committed to our welfare and our well-being. These are what I would refer to as true friends. Now, sadly, if we've got true friends, then the yin and the yang has to be true, that if we have true friends, there has to be fake friends as well. And that's where the Two-Faces in our lives come in. Now, if we compare and contrast the Harvey Dents in our lives to the Two-Faces in our lives, what's the difference? The Two-Faces in our lives are the selfish people in our lives who are only focused on themselves. So what do? They constantly sow discord and chaos. Sometimes they even pose as our friends so they can ultimately manipulate and control us to get more of what they want. You know, when you're dealing with a Two-Face, there's always an ulterior motive. There's always a hidden agenda. Their lives are often filled with self-induced drama. Now, think about the Two-Faces in your life. These are the individuals that lie, that cheat, that steal, and they even claim to be looking out for us At the same time, they're manipulating, they're using us, they're lying to us, they're cheating, and they're stealing from us, all claiming to be looking out for what's best for us, when in fact, they're looking out what's best for them. These are the people who are always working some angle so they can take the credit and they can get the win, and they really don't care who they hurt as long as they come out on top. Now, why is that? Because it's all about them to the exclusion of everyone else. We need to recognize these individuals because the two faces that you and I have in our lives live by the mantra, heads I win, tails you lose. These are the fake friends that you and I have in our lives. So what's the difference between a true friend and a fake friend? Well, first, a good friend is going to be genuine and they're going to offer their unending support to help us get from where we are to where we want to be. Good friends care about our welfare, they care about our well-being, and they're willing to offer genuine support when times are good and even when times are bad. Now, contrast that to a fake friend, and a fake friend isn't going to be genuine. They're not going to support you because they are self-serving. Now, they're going to be around, but only when it benefits them or only when they can get something from us. Now, secondly, when we look at good friends and fake friends, good friends are going to be loyal. They're going to stand by you, they're going to stand by me, and they're going to stand with us even when it's not popular, or they're going to stand beside us even when we make mistakes. They're going to be the ones that help pick us up, dust us off, and get us back on the road so we can get back on the journey that we're pursuing together. Now, compare that to the fake friends who are going to be fickle individuals that show up only when it's convenient for them. They're going to be inconsistent in the way that they support you, if they support you at all. These are the folks who are going to disappear when we need them, only to reappear when they want or need something from us. Remember, real friends treat us with respect. They're going to be honest with us, and this is the third character difference between good friends and fake friends. Real friends are going to encourage our potential, and they're going to encourage us to continue to grow and learn and become better at who we are and what we do. And they're going to do what they can to help provide what we need to make that happen. Now, on the other hand, fake friends are going to be jealous of our success because it takes away from their success in their mind. So what are they going to do? While they're out there praising us in public, they're going to be criticizing us behind our backs. And sometimes we're going to find that these fake friends not only criticize us behind our backs, sometimes they even do it in the public persona. They're going to be looking for any opportunity to put us down so they can build themselves up and elevate themselves, making themselves look good at our expense. Now, the fourth contrast between a real friend and a fake friend is this. Real friends are going to be dependable. You and I know we can count on our real friends because they're going to be there when we need them. They're going to show up, and we know that when they tell us they're going to do something, they're going to follow through. Their word is their bond. And if we know that they say, I will be with you at such and such a time to help you with X, Y, or Z, we know we can rely on them to be there and to do what they promise to do because they keep showing up in our lives. Now, contrast that with a fake friend, and what do we see? They're not dependable, they're hypocrites. They may flatter us for a moment to gain our favor, but remember, if they're gaining our favor, there's always an ulterior motive. They want something from us. Now, they're not going to offer genuine support. They're not going to offer encouragement. They may say they're going to show up, but likely they don't. Have you ever had a friend like that? I have over the years. People that have promised me, John, I love what you're doing and I want to be a part of it. And I never hear from them again. You and I can both see who those people are. We now know and understand real friends versus fake friends. Now, think about that. And let me give you one more fifth thought between a real friend and a fake friend. A real friend makes us feel like we belong. When we're in their presence, it just feels right. They feel like a brother or a sister or the best friend that's always there and always going to be an encourager and supporter in our lives. What I love about real friends is they include us in their lives and they enjoy being included in ours. A real friend is going to live life with you and you're going to live real life with them. What I love about my real friends is when I see them, they greet me with warm affection. They affirm me, and I know that they truly have my very best interest at heart. Now, if I compare that to some individuals in my life who I know are fake friends, these are the individuals that keep me at arm's length. They never really accept me, they never really embrace me, and they never really invite me to be a part of their group. And as much as I invite them to be a part of my group and to be a part of my life, they always stay at arm's length. They only get so close, but never close enough to really get to know them. Now, why is that the case? Again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Fake friends only have their best interest at heart. So they're going to seek to manipulate or influence you or influence me solely to get what they want. Fake friends are the two faces in our lives. And here's what I'm here to tell you about the two faces in your life. These are the people that hold you back. These are the people that will intentionally sabotage your success. These are the people every day by their words and by their actions, they're living by that mantra, heads I win and tails you lose. With a two-face, there's no win for you, but there's always a win for them. Now, that takes me back to what I started when I began to introduce this concept. It's important that you and I know who is showing up in our lives. I was talking about this with my wife at lunch today that warning labels are mandated on many of the products and services that you and I consume. Now, why is that? Because what we don't know could potentially harm us. So maybe, just maybe, you and I need to learn how to identify the two faces in our lives. And I've given you some really good tips how to recognize 5 unique things that I shared with you in terms of how to recognize a real friend versus a fake friend. But we need to be able to identify these two faces who keep showing up, keep demanding that their own agenda be honored, and we need to place a warning label squarely, if not figuratively, on their foreheads. And maybe that warning label says something like this: warning, this individual may display traits and behaviors that are harmful to your welfare, your well-being, and your long-term success. Now, these may include a desire to win at all cost, jealous or self-serving behavior, or a disrespectful attitude. They may also violate boundaries, betray trust and confidence, make empty promises that they never intend to keep. These individuals may seek to manipulate, to influence, or to control you for their own selfish ends. They may also be prone to gossiping and backbiting. Understand that exposure to these individuals may lead to isolation, heartbreak, loneliness, and disappointment, and long-term exposure may lead to illness, injury, or even death. Now, that to me is a great warning label, and in that are the definitions of all you need to know to be aware of who the two faces are in your life. I had a friend once tell me that he started to pray for protection from his enemies, and all of a sudden he started to lose what he thought were his friends. Now, at first, he didn't understand what was going on, but after a season, he paused and reflected on what was happening. And all of a sudden, he realized that his prayer had been answered. Why? The people that he had admitted into his life were two faces. They were fake friends who, while pretending to be a real friend, had their own agenda. They had their own ulterior motives. And as my friend looked back over where he was when they were in his life and where they are now, he realized that the answer to prayer was the fact that they had been removed from his life because they were the people who were holding him back and sabotaging success in his life. I love the fact that he said, John, God sometimes answers prayer in mysterious ways, and I'm glad those fake friends are gone. Now, I can tell you that my friend's life is much better as a result of learning to recognize who he was allowing into his life and removing the two faces that were sabotaging his success. So let me leave you with this. learning to recognize the patterns of behavior that just aren't right, that point to a two-face trying to get into your inner circle to manipulate, influence, or control you. Learning to recognize these patterns of behavior are essential to our long-term success. And if you and I want to mitigate the negative influence and the negative impact these two faces can have in our lives, we've got to learn to recognize them for who they are and get them out of our inner circle as soon as possible. You know, I love the fact that when Batman would capture Two-Face, he would have him incarcerated so he would be separated from engaging in behaviors that would harm other people. And maybe we need to incarcerate those people and keep them away from our thinking and from our saying and from our doing and from our becoming so we can become a better version of who we are and what we do. So let me leave you with this. You and I, we need to recognize who is showing up in our lives and whether or not their influence that they're having over our lives and the result of the lives that we're experiencing is positive or negative. Because I can tell you this, having the wrong people in your life are going to hold you back. Having the wrong people in your life are going to sabotage your success. But having the right people in your inner circle can literally propel you forward into your destiny. Having the right people in your life are going to move you forward. They're going to help accelerate your success, and you're going to be better for having them in your life. So let me leave you with a question as I wrap up, and this is a question only you can answer. Who's showing up in your life? I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.